Hi, Greg James from Greg James Fishing World here, and today we're going to be talking about garfish floats. And this is a bit bigger than a lot of people would expect. Most people, when they catch garfish, use pencil floats. We use floats because garfish is a surface feeding fish. They live a lot of the time in less than 3 or 4 meters of water, and because of the type of fish or the species that it is, it'll take baits that are off the bottom. So you don't need heavy weights, you need floats and things that will put your line and your bait on the surface of the water. And the reason I've got this big, sort of a bit clunky looking style float is because for jetty fishing it's got a little bit of extra weight on it, which allows you to flick it out off the jetty away from all the other guys' lines and stuff like that, so you can catch that big fish. It's a simple rig. You need a little bit of light line. I've got some red line here. The colour doesn't really matter. If you've got a pencil float, you can use that as well. And you need at least, I think, 1.5 metres to 2 metres of line below the basis of your float. So it's really important that the float is there to get your line up off the bottom where the garfish and sometimes tommy roughs are. But you need to be able to fish quite differently to what you'd fish with fish that are on the bottom or in deeper water. So I'm using a piece of split shot here, which you can buy from all fishing tackle shops, just to stop the float moving up and down the line, squeezing it together with a pair of pliers. They're pretty easy to do. You just make sure you don't take off the fingers at the same time. Squeeze it together. So I'm attaching a second split shot to the other side down the bottom, if you like, of the float. That just stops the float moving around when the fish are biting. It's a bit finicky, but it is a really good way to just make sure that the float doesn't complicate things by getting too far down the line onto your hook. So you just got to be a bit careful here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, no fingers missing. So in effect what you've got is I've used a fairly large split shot there. You don't have to go that large, you can go a lot smaller, but that's just a demo example. And that line, that float now will just work like that. Leave a little bit of space for it to move around, and that will have a beneficial effect when you're catching the gar in a little moment. I'll show you how to attach the hooks. So we've got the float, we've got the stoppers, if you like, the split shot to stop it moving around. Then we have this fairly long piece of line, and I reckon I'll go 2 meters, and then you attach 2 hooks, and you use fairly small hooks. And the reason I use these is that garfish is a species where its mouth is actually quite different from any other fish. It actually feeds from the top with that big long pointy beak, and these small hooks will actually fit and float in the water, and with a little bit of bait attached to them, long shank again I should say, and fully cover the hook with your baits. You use a little bit of cockle, you could use gents, you could use bits of really soft squid, whatever, and completely cover that hook so that as the gar comes up to it, garfish aren't voracious feeders. They tend to suck on the bait a little bit, and that's why you need a small gauge, and the gauge is the distance between the shank and the pointy bit of the hook. And then about 2/3 of a metre down, you tie off your first hook. So my favourite loop again is you just pull that line through itself, over it goes. A lot thinner line. Garfish are a very light species, beautiful eating. You pull it tight. You don't have to get too fancy about how large that loop is. It doesn't really matter. I tend to tie large loops simply because as I'm getting older it's a little easier for me to thread it all, to be honest. So I thread that through. Red's my favourite colour today, but for no reason, then that's how I got the stuff when I bought it. Pull that through there, click it tight, and that's your first hook. And that's about halfway along, 2/3 of the way along your line. The trick when attaching your second hook is to have it far enough away so that when the second hook is hanging down your line and it's flopping around in the water, big tip about garfish, when they attack the bait, they'll twist it and turn it like a crocodile does, would you believe? And they'll twist that line around and around and around. So you need the hooks away from each other. The last thing you need is those hooks tangling. So enough of that. We tie off the line. One, careful here, 1, 2, there we go. Cut off that excess line, you don't need that, that'll just tangle things. Click it off. Got your second little hook, nice little hook like that, through he goes, we're almost there. I retie my garfish lines every time I go fishing, because after a good day on the gar, they twist the crazy out of these lines, and they're not as tense, not as tight, not as effective. So each day I'll cut the old line off, redo it, and we're just about there. quite large. Sorry about this, but there we are. We've got the float at the top with a little bit of that give that I keep talking about down to your first hook, and that's 2/3 of a metre. Really nice. This will be a good little unit. I'd really happily fish with this right now. Off to your first hook, and then down about another 1/3 of a metre to your second hook. Another tip with this one is, if you're using cockle, use the black heart tip of the cockle on the bottom hook. Seriously, you'll catch more fish. Softened squid works, gents work. I tend to alternate the baits, always fish with a couple of different types of bait to see which is working. Some days Gar take the top hook, some days they take the bottom. This will work for Tommy Ruffs as well. It's a great rig, a simple rig, and like I said, retie it every time you go out. Nice and tight line, no crinkles, no twirls, no twists, and good fishing and tight lines.